Thanks, everybody. Welcome and good afternoon. My name is Jeffrey Johnston, and I'll be today's facilitator. In addition to being today's facilitator, I'm also the Indian Health Service Acquisition Career Manager. I'm a Certified Contracting Officers Representative and Program Manager, and I oversee IHS Core and Program Manager certification programs, as well as the faculty contracting program supporting over 800 cores, contracting staff, and program managers across IHS nationwide. So welcome to every one of my colleagues who's joining us today. In collaboration with the Department of Health and Human Services and Office of Management and Budget, the Indian Health Service initiated rulemaking that responds to long-standing recommendations from the tribes and tribal organizations that is proposing a rule to ensure compliance with the Buy Indian Act authority when carrying out federal procurement activities. In support of the proposed rule, today, you will hear from the IHS Acting Director, Elizabeth Fowler, Mr. Santiago Almaraz, the IHS Head of Contracting Activity, and the Acting Director of the IHS Office of Management Services, and representatives from IHS and HHS who will provide updates to the Indian Health Service of contracting policies and procedures associated with implementing the Buy Indian Act of 1910. And we'll have time after these presentations today to hear from members of the community, from the tribal leaders, from any companies joining us today. I especially want to welcome our tribal leaders and your representatives. So as I mentioned, as a core and a program manager, it's important that we who are planning acquisitions have an awareness about what contractors are out there that we might want to do business with and the government who can meet the government's needs. And many of you on today's call who may have received federal contracts may already be working with cores or program managers. But for those not familiar, even before contracts are awarded, cores and program managers support the acquisition process. We do market research, we talk closely with industry, we help to define government requirements, and we're working closely along the way pre-award with the department and other agencies to ensure that when IHS has a need for goods or services, that we understand and can communicate what that need is so that the business community can respond to those government requests for proposals and requests for quotes. And as part of good acquisition planning, of course, we help the contracting officers and contract specialists to develop those acquisition strategies. We help to develop those acquisition plans and approaches and what is the best method to acquire those goods and services. We monitor and inspect deliverables, and we document contractor performance at the end of the contract rating period. We have to be good planners, but also good communicators. We have to have strong business skills and also the technical knowledge and skills to understand the contracts that we're appointed to oversee. And while we don't award the contract, we are a valuable member of the acquisition team to make recommendations to our contracting officers, many of who are joining us today. I've been a core at IHS since 2016, and I worked at HHS since 2007. When I visit IHS hospitals and clinics, I can't help but think about the contractors, many of whom are small businesses or team with small businesses who provide critical medical staffing support, infrastructure support for ongoing facility maintenance, help our billing staff and our administrative staff with everything from supporting our electronic medical record to other IT services, from fire alarm testing services, accreditation support, lab services, pharmacy and telehealth, construction and architect and engineering services, and so much more. And when time is of the essence, it's always helpful to know about those companies that may be able to meet our government's acquisition needs in a short time frame. I had the chance just recently at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic to serve as the core on a pilot IHS National COVID-19 Critical Care Response Team contract, which, by the way, after doing market research that included a formal request for information, IHS identified at least 2 small native-owned companies who showed capability to meet the government's objectives. IHS ended up setting aside that opportunity for a small native-owned company and competed the requirement amongst those small native-owned firms, which resulted in a single award contract to one of those companies in May of 2020. And this is just one example that I want to highlight because many IHS staff, especially our contracting officers, cores, and program managers, will have a significant part to play in assisting IHS to meet the Buy Indian Act goals. When we know about Native-owned companies, it's very helpful to the process, and I'm delighted to be part of this conversation with you all today. Before we hear from Ms. Fowler, I just wanted to share a few reminders that one, this session is being recorded, and while IHS welcomes input from many stakeholders, the primary purpose for today's call is a formal tribal consultation. And we would really like to hear feedback from tribal leaders and your representatives. All participants, unless you are speaking, will be on mute. And then when it's time for open discussion, you may unmute your phone or speakers. You can also input comments and questions in the chat or raise your hand if you're joining us by Zoom to share your thoughts. We're holding all questions until the end of the presentation and during the open discussion period. If there are contractors on today's call, we definitely are interested in your input and knowing about your company. However, today's call is not a forum to promote your particular services. In addition, please refrain from asking about any forthcoming or active solicitations. IHS posts open contract opportunities on www.sam.gov. All right, with that, I'm going to let Ms. Fowler, turn the speaker over to Ms. Fowler.
Well, welcome everyone, and thank you, Jeffrey, for the introduction. I do want to let everyone know that if you've heard me speak in similar forums, you've heard me say, and I do mean it, that these opportunities to hear directly from you are very valuable to me, and I look forward to hearing from you today regarding the important topic of the Buy Indian Act. IHS considers regular and meaningful consultation and collaboration with tribes as essential for a sound and productive relationship and a cornerstone of our government-to-government relationship with you, our tribes and tribal leaders. The Buy Indian Act authorizes the agency to set aside federal contracting opportunities for Native-owned and controlled businesses, which allows for economic development in Indian country and instills pride in the Native communities that aspire to gain or maintain the business acumen essential to compete in the federal marketplace. In collaboration with the Department of Health and Human Services, I am happy to tell you that the IHS has submitted a notice of proposed rulemaking in support of the Buy Indian Act. This proposed rule was published to the Federal Register in November of 2020, and the comment period has recently been reopened with a deadline of Monday, June 21st, 2021. The proposed rule responds to long-standing recommendations from tribes and tribal organizations for the agency to enforce Buy Indian Act authority when carrying out federal procurement activities. Investing in tribal communities through our contracting and purchasing activities supports the overall IHS mission of raising the physical, mental, social, and spiritual health of American Indians and Alaska Natives to the highest level by supporting economic sustainability and development in Indian country. Economic development is an important part of addressing the social determinants of health that contribute to health disparities in our communities. The proposed rule also impacts an important aspect of the IHS strategic plan regarding strengthening IHS program management and operations by improving business processes that support value-based purchasing and standardized management strategies and contracts to advance the IHS mission. For the past 2 years, IHS has continued to obligate approximately $1 billion in commercial contract dollars per year. A significant amount of these dollars can and should be set aside for competition among Indian economic enterprises. With this proposed rule, IHS will ensure that IHS commercial contract opportunities start with the Buy Indian Act, and that IHS acquisition and program staff will support this requirement. The proposed rule will also satisfy the recommendations set forth in the 2015 GAO report on IHS use of the Buy Indian Act. The two remaining GAO recommendations for executive action call for IHS to clarify and codify policies related to the priority of use of the Buy Indian Act and specify how data collection and reporting of key requirements, challenges, and self-certification will be implemented. Once this rule is formalized, IHS is confident these GAO recommendations will be implemented and closed. I want to thank you again for participating in today's consultation in order to provide valuable feedback and collaboration in this proposed rulemaking process. And I look forward to the discussions and to hear the feedback from our tribal leaders on ways we can improve our consultation activities. Thank you again for this opportunity, and we do appreciate your continued partnership and engagement. And that concludes my remarks for today.
Great. We're so glad you could join us, Ms. Fowler. And next is Mr. Almaraz.
Yes, thank you, Jeffrey. And thank you, Ms. Fowler, for your opening remarks in support of this big step forward, support of Indian country. It is very much appreciated. Good afternoon or good morning. My name is Santiago Almaraz, and I am the current Acting Director for the Office of Management Services here at IHS. And I am also the IHS Head of Contracting Activity for the agency. I'm an enrolled member of the San Carlos Apache tribe located in Eastern Arizona. And I would like to quickly express my thanks to all IHS personnel who have assisted in getting this proposed rule prepared and published. I would also like to express my thanks to the HHS Executive Secretariat, Policy Coordinator, the Office of Assistant Secretary and Financial Resources, Office of Acquisitions, and the Office of Management and Budget. Their support in this initiative has truly been a great asset. As a quick update to the current NPRM Federal Register notice posting, most of you on the call are aware that the initial Federal Register notice was posted back in November 2020, with the comment period ending in January 11th, 2021. IHS received various tribal and public requests to extend the comment period, but unfortunately, due to the presidential and administrative transition, the initial Federal Register notice could not be extended. IHS then issued a request to reopen, and the new Federal Register notice was reopened on April 21st with the 60-day comment period that ends on Monday, June 21st. Next slide. In support of the IHS mission, I've listed a few key IHS priorities to promote a continued and further commitment to tribal partnerships to improved quality of and access to care. In my tenure as the IHS HCA, my goal is to fully support these very important agency priorities while ensuring that IHS contract activities are transparent, fair, and accountable. Additionally, to ensure inclusiveness of small businesses, contract opportunities to also account for Indian economic enterprises with preference to Indian small business economic enterprises. Next slide. The Buy Indian Act is one of the oldest placed into law. IHS provides healthcare to American Indians and Alaska Natives, and this authority derives from the Snyder Act of 1921. And through the Transfer Act of 1954, Congress transferred this responsibility and other healthcare functions from the Department of the Interior to the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, later identified as the Department of Health and Human Services. The Buy Indian Act applies to IHS commercial contract opportunities and does not apply to contract issued and managed by the tribes under the Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act, Public Law 93-638. Next slide. The proposed rule sets to amend the current Health and Human Services regulations. The current HISAR that pertains to the Buy Indian Act is brief and has inconsistencies not parallel with the Department of the Interior's Buy Indian Act rule. Since IHS and BIA are the only two agencies within the federal government authorized to utilize the Buy Indian Act, IHS considers maintaining consistency with BIA. There's no real reason for us to reinvent the wheel. In support of the recently passed Indian Community Economic Enhancement Act of 2020, the IHS will continue to partner with the BIA to harmonize the acquisition regulations from both departments. Both IHS and BIA understand there are imperfections in the Buy Indian Act itself, that's self-certification process, to include how deviations and challenges are processed. This rule formalizes the administrative procedures for all IHS commercial acquisition activities and locations to ensure uniformity. This rule, once passed, will be maintained by the HHS Assistant Secretary for Financial Resources, ASFR, in collaboration with IHS. Next slide. So why the Buy Indian Act? The IHS, where authorized and practicable, will consider all eligible commercial contract dollars to be set aside for Indian economic enterprises. We fully understand the intent of the Buy Indian Act and want to ensure that Indian country can benefit from approximately $1 billion in IHS commercial contract opportunities. In fiscal year 20, IHS awarded over $43 million to IEEs and ISBs. Please keep in mind that this figure only identifies those awards made in response to IHS Buy Indian set-aside procurements. One of the things that I've identified in previous consultations, as well as my time at the Bureau of Indian Affairs, those of you who are familiar with the BIA know that it provides administrative support and trust services to education, as well as law enforcement in Indian country. And when we first started the Buy Indian Act at the Indian Affairs, we didn't see a lot of Native-owned companies that provided goods and services to educational service, or to education and law enforcement. So as we started to be more consistent with the Buy Indian Act at BIA, we did see an improvement in those available contractors come through, either through developing on their own or partnering up with other companies. This is going to be true and will be true for IHS. Currently, as we perform more contract actions, we are not seeing a lot of Native-owned companies that provide medical services and goods. And we will see that this will continue to change and improve as the Buy Indian Act is finalized. Next slide. This table shows IHS Buy Indian awards since fiscal year 2015. Although we've made some good progress in the last few years, I do anticipate this to change for the better once this rule is finalized. This rule will formalize IHS procurement processes and identify how IHS contracting staff and program staff will ensure set-asides for their requirements. Next slide. The NPRM defines an Indian economic enterprise as any business activity owned by one or more Indians, federally recognized Indian tribes, or Alaska Native corporations. In order for an enterprise to identify and self-certify as an IEE, it will need to ensure it possesses and maintains the following criteria. Next slide. The IHS shall give preference to IEEs through set-asides when acquiring the following goods and services. IHS will continue to follow federal acquisition regulations set under FAR Part 12 and FAR Part 13, with a caveat that those acquisitions be set aside exclusively for Indian small business economic enterprises. IHS will follow the rule of two for Buy Indian set-asides. If there's no reasonable expectation that two or more responsible IEEs or ISBs will respond, or that award cannot be made at a reasonable price, the CEO will move forward and deviate away from the Buy Indian Act. Next slide. So deviation is an exception to the requirement to utilize the Buy Indian Act. The CEO will document the contract file with an approved deviation if any of the following occur. IHS will record and maintain a repository of all deviations to ensure IHS COs and program offices are fulfilling this responsibility. Next slide. I provided a definition of an IEE in the previous slide. And to even be considered for an IHS Buy Indian Act award, the offeror must meet the following criteria to include completing a self-certifying IEE status on the IHS designated IEE representation form. Next slide. All criteria identified in the previous slide to include meeting the definition of an IE must be maintained throughout the following time periods. Both IHS and BIA understand the self-certification process needs much improvement. Once this rule is finalized, IHS plans to partner with BIA in identifying and moving toward a more automated process. Those of you aware, the Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business also has self-certification that VA manages. And VA has developed an automated system called VetBiz to verify and capture these companies. Next slide. One last critical piece to the Buy Indian Act NPRM is the challenges to IEE representation. Any interested party can challenge the representation of an offer claiming IEE status. Like the deviation approvals, the contractor completed IEE representation form will be collected and verified prior to award and maintained in an IHS repository and made available via IHS public sites or other means. More to come on this as the rule is finalized. Next slide. So today's tribal consultation seeks your input on current challenges or benefits your tribe has and is currently experiencing in connection to the Buy Indian Act. As previously mentioned, IHS understands the current process is not perfect, especially when it comes to self-certification. But we look to you to assist IHS in identifying any areas of concerns needing focus. IHS also recognizes that the Department of Interior, Bureau of Indian Affairs also utilizes the Buy Indian Act, and I want to ensure you all that IHS continues to have a strong partnership with BIA. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeffrey Johnston to begin open discussions. Sir?
Thank you, Santiago. I'm going to just stop sharing my screen so I can see the chat. I want to look and see first if there's anyone on the phone who has a question. You can unmute yourself and ask your question. I'm looking to see if I see any hands raised in the chat for people who joined us via Zoom. I'm not seeing any hands raised at this time. I don't see any messages in the chat yet. Give folks a few minutes to, I know you shared a lot of great information with us today. So as you heard from Mr. Almaraz, if anyone has any comments, we're definitely open to hearing from you. Especially we'd love to hear sort of if there's any challenges that your organization might face when seeking Buy Indian Act contracts, any recommendations that the tribes or tribal organizations might have on strategies to educate tribal members about Buy Indian Act to help foster that economic growth and sustainability in Indian country that Ms. Fowler talked about.
Hi, Mr. Johnson. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Shane. Can you also state your tribal affiliation or company affiliation?
Yeah, absolutely. The name of our company is Hope Day, and we're a Native American woman-owned small business. The majority owner is, she's a member of the Creek Nation in Oklahoma. And I apologize, I'm traveling, so I got onto this call a little late, and maybe I'm going to repeat something you already said, but I guess I just wanted to, our company is I've been doing federal government business for about 15 years, and then I joined Hope Day 2.5 years ago or so as their business development director. And so we have a lot of relationships with industry leading manufacturers in dental and in pharmacy automation, and also in the medical arena. It's primarily capital equipment. But I mean, we're with the top manufacturers, and I see a lot of deals that are done through IHS that are bought through companies that are not Native American, and then oftentimes, most of the time, their pricing is higher than ours. So not only, are we not getting the business, but additionally, IHS is not getting the best deal. And so, and I'm not complaining at all. What I'm getting to is, if there's a way, we've called the regional IHS facilities. We've made relationships with some of the smaller facilities that are maybe 4 hours away from any other civilization, and we've done some good sales with those folks. But I'm just wondering if there's a way or a platform to really get our capability statement out and get that in the hands of all the IHS contracting officers. So when they have a procurement come across for specific manufacturer's equipment, they can say, wow, okay, we have a Native American owned business that's direct with that manufacturer.
Great suggestion. Santiago, are there any plans to have something like that, an email address that companies can send in capability statements?
Yes, well, as I mentioned on previous slides, one of the things that we are looking at doing is improving the self-certification process. And as you all know on the call, that is something that is it has imperfections, and there's challenges, and that could potentially lead to fraud. And that means a contractor who's stating that they're part of a federally recognized tribe not being the case. So with that, we're looking at other options in terms of how we manage that data in terms of how we self-certify. And as I mentioned, similar to VA, they have a portal called VetBiz, and they utilize that portal for contractors to be able to register. And then of course, that particular portal confirms that the company is who they say they are. And IHS, in partnership with BIA, is looking to move forward with that. We're currently in collaboration with VA. They've provided us a lot of good information. But of course, the one solution isn't always going to work for every agency. So that's why when this does occur, we will seek input from not only from our area offices, but also from our tribes, as well as from Indian country, identifying what those possible challenges are. So getting to your question, sir, as we start to move forward and establishing those that particular portal in support of the Buy Indian Act, it'll be a lot easier for you as an Indian-owned company to have your listing and your company provided on that portal, on that listing. I do have to say that if there's instances that you are aware of in which a particular solicitation is being issued, and that there are at least one other company besides your company that can perform this good or perform this service or provide this good, please bring this to my attention, or Mr. Ken Truesdale, who is the acting division director for action policy here at IHS. If we get that information, we can always look into it and ensure that that the particular CEO has indeed looked at the potential use of the Buy Indian Act for that procurement. As I mentioned earlier, as we try to issue sources sought on a lot of our medical needs for goods and services, we do find that there are companies that are slowly coming out, but for the most part, we're not seeing a whole lot. So as we start to see this more, and we're more consistent to setting aside for Buy Indian, we are aware that Indian country will see this, and more companies and more partnerships will start to be built. So that's kind of a long answer to your question, sir. If I didn't answer your question, please let me know, and I can elaborate more.
No, yeah, I think you answered your question, and I've worked in the with a service disabled veteran-owned small business many years ago, 10 years ago, and so I'm familiar with VetBiz, and so I assume, like you said, you've been working with the VA, and hopefully IHS has is going to be able to set up some type of portal so the contracting officers have one place to go to pull up capability statements, past performance contracts, and manufacturers, whatever you might sell, and so I think that's good. And I guess in the near term, it would be nice if and I know these folks don't want to be bombarded with emails. I mean, I've emailed Mr. Primo at the headquarters in Maryland several times, and he's been very responsive and gotten some information out for us to the Indian chiefs and different facilities. And we much appreciated that. But I'm just wondering if, if there's like a regional contact for each IHS facility that would be willing to accept capability statements and just documentation of what a past performance, whatever it might be, in order to get it out there before there is a portal developed. And then one last thing that I'll say is some of the manufacturers that we're with, I've had very long relationships with, and in the Native American business or the Native American space, they've decided that our company is the only one that they want to work with. And so if we have a sole source letter for a particular manufacturer, like we have an industry leading digital imaging manufacturer, and they're the federal government leader and world leader. But for IHS procurements, they will only sell through our company. And so I assume a sole source letter will suffice as long as the price is reasonable. Obviously, if anyone's price gouging with a sole source letter, then IHS needs to go direct to the manufacturer or another company. But I guess there was two different things there. So I don't know if you want to talk about sole sourcing and then like a temporary solution until some type of portal is developed.
Yes, sir. So I'll kind of elaborate on the first part of your question. So each of the IHS areas has a chief contracting officer. And on the IHS website, if you go into the search function and you click in Division of Acquisition Policy, you'll see that particular page come up. And within that page is a list of all the staff, the CCOs that are currently in place throughout IHS. Those listing of CCOs, you can contact them directly, or you can contact me directly, or Mr. Ken Truesdale. Also, John Ferguson is our small business specialist for IHS. So you can contact or provide your capability statement to either one of us. And we can, of course, disseminate that out to all of IHS. But if there's a specific solicitation or a specific need in a particular area that you'd like to focus on, then the contacts for that particular area, that CCO, can be contacted, and you can provide your capability statement to them. And the second part of your question, sir, in terms of, and I'm sorry, sir, could you just repeat that second part again, just real quickly?
Sure, yeah, and I should have separated that into two things because the first one was long, and I apologize for that. But the second question I had, and we can be brief about it, but I understand the rule of two and the way it works with the Kingdomware ruling and at the VA, and this is what IHS is trying to do. We have a few manufacturers that we've had longstanding relationships with, and they've given us sole source rights to sell into IHS. So they won't sell directly to IHS, nor will they allow any other distributors or small businesses of any kind to sell into IHS. So when we have a letter like that from the manufacturer, I assume that IHS would be like, similar to the VA, and they would honor that. They would honor that letter, the sole source letter, as long as, again, the price is reasonable. I mean, all the contracting officers can look up what this capital equipment should be sold for, and as long as there's no price gouging happening, we have a sole source letter that says Hope Day is the only company that can sell our 3D imaging products. Then I assume that the contracting officers and or the facilities will honor those letters. Is that true?
Yes, sir. So you're exactly right, and that in the event that your company is the only company that could provide this type of good, then of course, it's the responsibility of that CEO, the IHS CEO, to conduct, their due diligence in terms of initiating a sources sought notice, and also conducting market research to validate that is indeed the truth, or in the case. If it is the case, and of course, there are situations where we have utilized a sole source mechanism in the past. But of course, we do want to, like I mentioned in the previous slides, my goal is to keep things fair and transparent when we initiate these solicitations and these procurements, and allowing for full competition when it comes to Indian economic enterprises and small businesses. So definitely that's the case. Then of course the CEO will make a determination. Like you mentioned, as long as it's fair and reasonable pricing, they can proceed with an award.
Okay, yeah, thank you for answering that. And I apologize. I'm traveling internationally right now, and so I missed the beginning of this call, but maybe you covered it. But I know that you said that we can go on the IHS website under division and acquisition policy and find the chief contracting officer for each facility or region, which is great. And then if we wanted to reach out to Mr. John Ferguson or yourself and anyone else that you recommend, is there a good place for us to find the email addresses for those folks?
Yes, sir. What I'll do is this particular session is being recorded, and we will provide this recording on the IHS website, DAP. In addition to that, sir, on these slides that I have here, towards the end, will be contact information for both myself, Mr. Truesdale, and Mr. Ferguson.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you so much, first of all, for putting this on and giving us a voice and giving us a lot of good information, and thank you for answering my questions.
My pleasure, sir.
Yep. And if anyone wants to put your email in the chat and we can follow up with you, or you want to send us a capability statement, I know Mr. Wright just posted in chat, and I'll repeat it for those who are on the phone who may not be reading the chat. The Albuquerque Area Indian Health Service is having a virtual industry day. He requests, please send a copy of your capability statement so we can distribute this. And Eric Wright provided his email address. It's Eric, ERIC, .Wright, WRIGHT, @IHS.gov. And I know some other areas might be hosting industry days as well. I know the Albuquerque area is having one in June, on June 28th, a small business Indian firm virtual industry day. You can also call Mr. Wright at 505-256-6752.
And Jeffrey, I want to kind of add on to that. So the HHS OSDBU is sponsoring an Access to Success small business event at the end of this month. I believe it's June 28th through the 30th, and on June 29th, I believe, is when IHS will be participating in 2 one-hour sessions to provide a panel to respond to questions in regards to the Buy Indian Act. And its focus will be on construction as well as medical services and goods. So if you need more information on that, it is Access to Success, HHS OSDBU. It's a virtual small business event that is happening at the end of this month. There will be multiple topics, but as I mentioned, IHS will be participating with a focus at Buy Indian Act.
Okay, Santiago, we have 2 hands raised. I'm going to go to Bob Kelly first and then John Hawkins.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great, sir.
Great. I'm not a Zoomaholic or addict yet. I'm just getting used to it. So thank you for your patience. I jotted down a couple of quick questions. And one is, when is the launch date for your program to formally get started? Is it going to be next year, 2022? And the second thing is, will you're right around 5% of annual spend goals of your 1 billion. Do you have targeted goals, 20, 30%, all of it, that type of thing? And then how much will the new policies change the P card acquisitions and guidelines? Is there going to be any different thresholds? And the other item is IHS uses a GSA contract Will that change going forward? Will you always still have access to the GSA schedule with like a Staples or somebody? Or will you pull a lot of those commercial items off of GSA and just begin to set aside some of the acquisitions? And then another concern I have, and finally a concern I have, I've been a sole bidder on a couple of occasions and was not awarded the contract, and it had to unfortunately convert to a small business, and it's not easy for us to compete with 500 employees or less. So I withdraw my second bid. But is that going to change the rule of two? Is there some discretion for the CO in those situations, working with the client? And that's pretty much what I've got. And thank you for doing this. Very helpful. I'll put you back on mute.
Great, thank you, sir. And so the plan is for well, the initial plan, of course, was to hopefully get the proposed rule, the rule finalized in early 21, but due to challenges, of course, facing the COVID-19, as well as the transition administration, so these were delayed a bit. So we're still hoping that we can that the rule can be finalized by the end of this fiscal year. I know that's being very aggressive in terms of where we stand now. But if that's the case, then of course we do have a draft policy internal to IHS that we're ready to begin the process of implementing, and that's to support how IHS will process, native-owned procurements in support of deviations, reporting, training, and of course that's going to be rolled out to our IHS community, including contracting officers. And so, as I mentioned before, the current HISARs are very brief. There's no real structure as to how IHS and those COs that work in IHS are to set aside procurements, and how are they supposed to utilize deviations, how they're poised, how they are to process possible challenges to those contracts that may be awarded to native-owned companies. So there's a lot of different factors that come into play. The HISARs, of course, give us teeth finally, IHS to move forward with the Binding Act. The IHM will be specific to IHS and how we're going to report and how we're going to train and how we're going to ensure that our IHS community is aware. And so with that being said, you're going to see more of procurements being set aside for native-owned companies. So there is no goal right now with Buy Indian. When we do establish, we may speak more on that as we move forward. As you may know, VA, there's current legislation right now that's pending for VA for the office or for the Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business Program to be moved over to SBA. And so with that, we may see also an actual national goal, but that may be down the road. But for IHS, and, as I mentioned in my slide as well, we'd like to identify and consider all commercial contracts or commercial opportunities, contract opportunities to be considered by Indian first. And when I say that, of course, we look at the different criteria as to, issuing a sources sought. And that kind of answers part of your question in terms of, you said you were a sole bidder on a specific procurement. And so, the contracting officer, of course, is responsible for determining that the pricing, of course, is fair and reasonable. And of course, they have other criteria that they also have to follow in terms of, in some instances, it may be past performance, or it may be, responsibility and that kind of stuff. So there's other factors that, of course, the CEO is looking at, not just fair and reasonable price. So if there's an instance like that comes up again in the future, and I'm opening this up, and I've communicated this to all contractors that I've come into contact with. Please contact me or Mr. Ken Truesdale directly, and we'll always look into the situation to ensure that it's being processed in a fair manner, especially when it comes to the Buy Indian Act. Another part of your question was the effect on purchase cards. The current HISAR does not apply to P cards, although the actual IHM, the policy that we will implement down the road, will specifically identify that companies, that purchase card holders will also ensure that they utilize the Buy Indian Act. So as you know, purchase card holders are required, they have that card holder, so they're the ones that are determining that the price is fair and reasonable. They're ensuring that they don't go directly to Amazon or Staples, that they're looking at other social economic companies that could provide this good or services. They should already be doing that. And if there's a case where you are aware of that it's not the case, then like I mentioned, please let me know, and we'll definitely look into the situation. The same goes for Buy Indian. They should be giving consideration to Native-owned companies, even on the purchase card side as well. You mentioned about GSA, and unfortunately, GSA doesn't recognize the Buy Indian Act. We've had multiple calls with GSA over the course of years, even when I was with BIA, to try to see if they could assist us or support the Buy Indian Act. The recent conversation we had with GSA, I believe, was just over the summer of last year. So they were looking at opportunities or possible options of how they could support the Buy Indian Act. I will reach out to them again to re-engage the conversation and to see if there's anything that they've been able to identify in ways that they can support us, especially with this new ruling coming out that may help the situation, and is with BIA as well. In addition to that, you also have the new Enhancement Act, Economic Enhancement Act here that was passed back in December 2020, that kind of identifies that, that there's a possibility for the Buy Indian Act to be opened up to more, to not just BIA and IHS, but possible other agencies within DOI and HHS. And I believe that may have been all of your questions, sir, but correct me if I'm wrong. I may have missed one.
So Bob, this is Jeff, Mr. Kelly, this is Jeff again. When you were asking about GSA, were you asking if IHS will still be able to use GSA contracts in addition to the Buy Indian Act contracts? I just wanted to make sure we captured your question correctly.
Well, I'm just wondering, not just an office products contract or medical devices contracts, but how does the new initiative affect existing large firms that hold GSA contracts that are utilized by Indian Health? Will those be honored through the duration of the contract terms? Will they be put out for bid again? Yeah. With utilizing Buy Indian firms? What is there? What's generally speaking the long-term goal of existing contracts that you have in place, whether it's GE or some of that nature?
Yeah, every federal agency that I work with and talked to and had conversations with in regards to competition, and specifically also with Buy Indian Act, there's always been the question about recompeting particular requirements. And when we talk to our customers as acquisition personnel, a lot of times our customers get comfortable with certain companies, and that's all good. That's good with getting that good rapport with the company, with your contractor. That also sets up for a really good performance rating on their CPARs. But in all actuality, being able to recompete these and allow for other possible contractors to provide opportunities to get their foot in the door is exactly what I was speaking of when I said earlier about being transparent and being fair when it came to contract opportunities. And that's also within the Buy Indian Act. So if we have specific contracts in place, GSA or non-GSA, whether it's open market, we want to make sure that as COs throughout IHS that we're allowing for opportunities to recompete these requirements to allow for other companies that may have just been established in the last year or even base plus 4 option years, depending upon when the contract was initiated or awarded. So definitely want to make sure that you understand that if there is a specific contract in place that, you know, when that option period is to be exercised, or say the contract expires, you know, the base plus 5 years or whatever option years there are, that particular CEO will be doing their due diligence in coordination with the program office to ensure that they recompete these and provide for opportunities to other companies.
But as a follow-up, the client in Fort Hall, Idaho, they'll still have the option to use their P card with a Staples or Amazon or whoever at a certain dollar threshold, or if they know of a native supplier, they can use their discretion at seeking us out or finding us. Or will the policy reach so deep that it becomes an ingrained habit to buyers of influence that I'm going to reach out to a native firm first and give them an opportunity, or 2 firms as they become more aware of the suppliers out there. And then just as you were talking, I had a follow-up thought. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there are 2 types of healthcare facilities in Indian countries. The Indian health funded ones, and then there are some that are tribally funded as well, if I'm saying this right. Will those tribes, if they're utilizing federal funds, will they also have Buy Indian initiatives, or will it be more of a passive encouragement, or will they be self-directed? Maybe if you could kind of bounce between those 2, it would be helpful. I'll put you on mute.
Yeah, that that is the case in terms of tribal, you know, participation in the Buy Indian Act. As I mentioned before, the Buy Indian Act, as identified in this notice proposed rulemaking, does not apply to 638 contracts, and so those particular tribes, of course, I in my opinion, it'd be in their best interest to support, you know, Indian country and support the companies that are within their area or even outside the area that are native owned. But of course, that's to their discretion. And we're only supporting on the commercial side to ensure that, you know, the approximately $1 billion that we obligate annually in here at IHS, you know, are made more available to native owned companies. In terms of your question to purchase cards for the Buy Indian Act, that is indeed the situation where, and when we do purchase card training here at IHS, that is one of the things that, kind of one of the small examples that I give is, you know, if you have a specific need, an immediate need, say you come into the office and your mouse is broken or your keyboard is broken, and you check with your check with your property team to ensure, or they check with their property team to ensure that there's no keyboard, there's no mouse available that you can take on. So that's an immediate need, you know, so they're going to go and they need that immediately today, or they need it tomorrow. And so if there is a native owned company or a small business that could provide same day or next day delivery, then of course they'll move forward with that. But in the instance that there is not, then they could go down the street to Staples or Office Max and get that particular mouse or keyboard to ensure that they can continue performing their duties. But it doesn't mean walk around the office and say, hey, I'm going to Staples, you know, anybody need anything? So now your $50 procurement has added up to possibly $100 or $500 or more. So that's something that we discourage here at IHS.
We had another hand raised. Mr. Hawkins, John Hawkins, if you're still on the line, you can unmute.
Yes, good afternoon.
Speaker.
Can you hear me? Good. Yep.
We can hear you great.
My name is John Hawkins. I'm with Evolve Solutions. We're a tribally owned small disadvantaged business. I'm a tribe located in Mountain Center, California. Santa Rosa Band of Cahuilla Indians is the name of our tribe. My question was more along the lines of partnering because we're still fairly new. We're still trying to build our corporate qualifications. Been in business since 2017. So my question is more related to partnering with different organizations. And I guess so I know of the Indian Incentive Program. Could you speak more to how we could potentially leverage that as we try to build out corporate qualifications?
As we begin as I mentioned before, we're looking to partner with BIA and establishing a portal. And if you look at the VetBiz VA, and I apologize for continuing to reference the VA VetBiz, but they've set a good model for what we'd like to initially or eventually become. So if you look at the VetBiz site, they have various activities that they perform, and although IHS may not move towards all of those activities, that is something that we could also possibly include in the portal, and not only to identify, certified Indian-owned economic enterprises, but also an opportunity for those that are non-native to also identify possibility to partner, and that's another thing is, and I'm sure, sir, that you do participate in small business events, by the SBA. This event that we're doing here at the end of the month, this is sponsored by the HHS OSDBU office, and in that office, I think our conversation earlier this week, they mentioned that there's going to be quite a few hundred participants already signed up. That is a great opportunity to network and to identify yourself as a company, and also to possibly partner up with other companies. So there are multiple different avenues. Currently with IHS, we don't have a listing of native-owned companies that we can rely on. It's mostly just a listing that a lot of our CEOs hold on a spreadsheet. So this is why I'm saying that we're looking towards partnering with BIA to ensure that we have a better system to ensure that we're accounting for those native-owned companies that we can do business with.
Sounds good. Thank you. And just to kind of piggyback on that real quick. So we plan on attending the RES conference in July. Will there be organizations such as IHS out there? Do you have any idea?
Yes. In the past, when I was with BIA, I did participate in the RES conference, and I haven't had any plans to go out to the RES conference recently. It is a great conference. There's great information, a great place to network. We've had a table set up there to kind of promote and identify, opportunities that the agency has forward that native-owned companies could of course plan for. We don't have, like I mentioned, we don't have a plan to visit or to participate in that. But if there's an opportunity that RES comes forward and says, hey, we'd like you to participate because we understand that the Buy Indian Act is getting close to being finalized, the ruling, of course, then I'd be more than happy to present virtually with that particular event.
Sounds good. No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem, sir. And I just want to remind the individuals that have submitted their comments. They've been really great comments, and please do submit those comments formally through the federal docket, and so that way those comments get recorded, and we can address those and ensure that we make a response to those through the Federal Register notice. Thanks.
Santiago, there was also mention of CPARS. I'm wondering if you can speak briefly about what CPARS is for those on the phone who may not know, but that is another source that was resource, I mean.
Yes, sir. So CPARS is and Jeffrey, you may be able to provide the acronym details, but it is the program that allows for or provides for companies, of course, that do business with any federal agency. You know, when we actually perform our acquisitions here at IHS, we utilize CPARS to confirm that the company, you know, has either they have a history of past performance and how they performed, how they were rated by that agency in terms of how they performed. So it's a great tool that we utilize to confirm that the company, of course, is in great standing and continues to do a great job for any agency that they've performed for. So it's definitely a good tool that we utilize on our end, and Jeffrey is actually our point of contact and our subject matter expert on the topic, and he may be able to provide a little more detail as to all of its functions. Sir?
Yeah, sure. So CPARS is the Contract Performance Assessment and Reporting System. And I put the link in the chat. It's www.cpars.gov. That's C like Charlie, P like Paul, A like Apple, R like Robert, S like Sam.gov. And in order to get access to it, you have to have had a government contract already, and a government agency needs to have done a past performance review. That could be if you had a base year contract on the base year, if you had a base year contract with option years. Likely the option year periods were also evaluated, and potentially a final evaluation. So other government agencies have access to query this database. So for example, if you are a company and you have done business with BIA or VA or DOD, and you have a CPARS rating and you're bidding on a contract that IHS has, the contracting officer or contract specialist or a core might go into CPARS, type your vendor DUNS number or type a contract number or type a company name, and be able to pull up what other government agencies rated for your work on their contract. So it's a great resource. It's a great motivator, a great incentive to do well with other federal agencies. And that way IHS will also have access to that information. But you won't be able to see other companies' information. If you're a contractor, you won't be able to see how did another company do. It's only specific to the company that your company, your organization. I don't know if Mr. Truesdale was able to unmute. I know he was having a technical difficulty, but he had wanted to share some information. Ken, are you able to unmute? I can see you on here. Santiago, I don't know if you could check Ken's sound, but I'm not able to unmute him. And he wanted to share something.
Let's see. Yeah, I don't see an opportunity to unmute him. I don't believe. Yeah.
Okay.
He may need to call in. But I did see part of the question that Lauren Rusek asked about the possible listing of vendors. And as I mentioned earlier, in response to a previous comment, we do have listings that are kind of maintained, especially specifically. I know that areas do maintain their own native-owned company listing. We do have one that is of course that we manage here at the headquarters level, but it's something that of course takes a lot of time and energy to add on. And of course you got companies that of course are no longer possibly should remain on the list. So we try to do it the best it can. It's not the best listing, but if that's something that we can provide, it's not, of course, it doesn't encompass all of native-owned companies that we have. That's the whole purpose for us wanting to establish this portal, so that we can have an actual resource available to us and to Indian country to identify and confirm those native-owned companies.
Hey, Santiago, can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear
Yes,
you.
sir.
Yes, Ken.
Yeah, I tried another phone. I just had a couple of comments based on the questions that have been asked, and I apologize. I've been trying to unmute for most of the meeting. But anyhow, one of the best ways to get government contracts, whether it's by Indian or not, is to really pay attention to beta.sam.gov, or I guess you can get to it by www.beta.sam.gov, excuse me. Because our opportunities over $25,000 are posted there, just as other federal government agency requirements. The other suggestion I have is whenever you see a request for information or a sources sought synopsis and you're interested, your company's interested, please let us know. That's a time where you can really use the capability statement. The capability statements are good even before that, but unless we have a requirement for that particular item or service, it doesn't mean a lot to us. I mean, once we have a repository like VA has, or by Indian companies, the best way is to check that website on a regular basis, and again, to respond to RFIs, sources sought notices, and of course, respond to solicitations or requests for quotes. That's one thing I wanted to say. The other thing is, as the IHS competition advocate, if you have any questions about sole source requirements, et cetera, or you see something you don't think is right, by all means, let me know. There is a law that addresses sole source requirements. It's called the Competition and Contracting Act. There are some exceptions to the rule for competition, but there's not that many. So again, if you have any questions about competition or how best to get government contracts, by all means, let me know. My name is Ken Truesdale. You can get me at kenneth.truesdale@ihs.gov. Thank you.
Great. I also put your contact information in the chat, and then the slides will also be posted on the ihs.gov website.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
Okay, so I just wanted to just kind of provide some more updates in terms of the Buy Indian Act, kind of something additional that we're also working on. As you may know, Department of Labor is one of the only few agencies that has the authority to really police and monitor companies that do business on Indian country. Of course, you all are familiar with the TARO offices and the Tribal Employment Rights Office. And so right before the pandemic started, IHS had partnered with Department of Labor to establish, them monitoring our construction contracts. In addition to that, possible service contracts, and that's in support of Indian preference. So any contracts, any construction contract or service contracts that are performed on or near reservations, of course, companies are required to seek Indian preference. And so in addition to that, subcontractors under the Buy Indian Act. With that being said, ensuring that companies that we award to, whether they be native owned or non-native owned, are ensuring that they have an Indian preference program established when they go out to Indian country to perform these services. And so we're working with Department of Labor to provide them listings on an annual basis that they will then go through and ensure that those companies are indeed following the Indian preference program as established by their tribal employment rights. Just wanted to kind of give you another project we're working on in support of the Buy Indian Act. It's not just about commercial contracts, but it's also we're looking at improving how to ensure that laborers, local laborers, and those construction workers that are available there in those local locations have the opportunity to gain employment with those contractors that may be coming out to perform those services. So as I mentioned, there's the comment period does close June 21st. The initial comment period was closed back in January. Was reopened earlier in April. So it's been open for 60 days. So definitely we have received a few comments already. We've taken those comments that we received previously, and so we are and will address those comments, with the intent of hopefully we can move forward. HHS can of course move forward with finalizing this rule. That would be a great stepping stone, not only for IHS but also for Indian country.
Okay, I don't see any more hands raised at this time. You can also unmute if you heard something and have a question or just a general comment.
All right, Jeffrey, I think we can move forward.
Do you
I
want
have
to
the
put the
slides
last
here.
slide? Yeah, do you want to put the last slide up that has the contact information?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm just gonna post the actual, this information here is the actual details of the notice of proposed rulemaking that we just reopened. And as you can see, I mentioned the comment period does end on Monday, June 21st. So please do submit your comments to the federal docket and submit them directly through the FRN site. And then of course they'll get logged in and they'll be forwarded on to us so that we could, of course, start to consolidate those our responses and submit them up. And this is point of contacts, as I mentioned earlier. My name is Santiago Almaraz, and I'm the acting director for Office of Management Services, and I'm also the agency head of contract activity. And Mr. Ken Truesdale, who you heard on the phone earlier, he's the acting director for Division of Action Policy. And Mr. Ferguson, who was unable to be on the call today, is our agency small business specialist. And so if you have any questions in regards to the information provided, or maybe there's a question that you may think of later on today or in the following weeks, please don't hesitate to give us, send us an email or contact us directly, and we'll be very happy to respond to your comments or questions. And with that, I just wanted to also remind everybody that the Buy Indian Act, of course, it holds true to my heart. You know, as I mentioned, I work for Indian Affairs, and I help support the initiative there, and came to IHS, you know, with the vision of getting this particular rule finalized here. And so it's you think about the money, it's approximately $1 billion in commercial contracts, you know, that could be utilized to support economic sustainability and development in Indian country. And that says a lot right there, just in that one sentence. And so definitely want to support this initiative, and not just putting the rule out, not just putting out this Buy Indian Act out to say, okay, we've checked the box. We want to definitely move forward and ensure that, you know, what we've obligated in the past, like I mentioned, $43 million set aside, you know, not just awarded, but just set aside. That increases, you know, to in the hundreds of millions of dollars that would be available to Indian country. And with that, you know, I'll turn it over to Jeffrey for see if there's any last comments or questions before we end today's consultation.
I don't see any hands raised, and I don't see anyone on the phone trying to unmute. We can end early, Santiago, if there's no further questions.
Yes, sir, I'm fine with that. And as I mentioned before, please, if you come up with a question or a comment after the call today, please do send that email to myself, Mr. Truesdale, or Mr. Ferguson, and we'll definitely provide a response And hope you all have a great day. That appreciate your participation in today's consultation, and also want to thank Ms. Fowler again for being on the call and providing opening remarks. Thank you all.